Okay, so it's the end of May, and that means it's time for another Money Minute roundup from the month. I've got a few articles to share with you. I'm going to be talking about inflation. Has it peaked? Is the worst already behind us? We're going to talk about the Apple car. Apple makes iPhone and MacBook, but now they are looking at possibly making a car. So what could that look like? We're going to talk about recent college graduates and some unrealistic expectations that they have about how much money they're going to be making. And we also want to talk about soaring housing prices and touch again on how pastors can save big on taxes in retirement. So let's go ahead and jump into it today. These are some of the most interesting articles that I have gathered and seen throughout the month. Let's start with inflation. This is continues to be top of mind for a lot of folks. There is a great article out here recently that shows there may be some indications that inflation is starting to cool, and that we may have reached the peak already, and that it's going to continue to decline from here. Depending on how you want to look at it, some people are a little bit more of glass half full, and some people a little bit more glass half empty. But there are some encouraging signs, particularly in the automotive industry, in housing prices, and in the labor and wages sectors of the economy. Automobiles spiked last year in price. A lot of that was due to a supply shortage with semiconductors that are needed for new cars. So there's a big backup, and used car prices especially went soaring because of the lack of inventory. Some of that's starting to get fixed and smoothed out, and so prices for used cars are starting to fall back down to their historic levels. And hopefully we'll see car production ramping back up and automotive prices coming down a little bit. And the housing front, that's another interesting one because for a while we've been operating with a shortage. We're still operating with a shortage in America. There's still less homes than there are people looking to buy a home right now. But because of, number one, the new housing projects that have gotten underway and are starting to get completed, and then on top of that we have mortgage interest rates have started to go back up again. That's going to cool off a little bit of demand. If interest rates are higher, that means the affordability for a lot of people gets a little bit farther out of reach. And so the higher interest rates go, the more that puts a mortgage out of reach of regular everyday Americans. And so that may taper off a little bit. There's still high demand for housing, but it has fallen from the heights it hit even just a few months ago. In fact, existing home sales came down in April, so that was kind of interesting to see. And then labor and wages, we were in a scenario for a while where there were way more job openings than there were people available to fill those jobs in the workforce. And when that happens, the employees have all the leverage. They can negotiate for themselves better arrangements, better pay, better benefits, all of that. We saw a huge reset within the workforce. A lot of people quitting their jobs, going other places, starting their own businesses, working remotely. So COVID was part of that, obviously, that kind of spurred a lot of change within the workforce. And for a while now, employers have had to be the beggars and just trying to get everybody and anybody they can to help because there's been a working shortage. But recently here, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen Amazon, Walmart, Target, a lot of big retailers are saying that they've overhired, that they're actually overstaffed, and they need to thin out their employment roles a little bit. So we may see some of that coming back down to earth, because when you have a labor shortage, that's going to drive wages up, right? Companies are going to be willing to pay more to get good talent and workers because they just need them. They're competing with all these others for work. But if now they're in a place where they're overstaffed, well, are they going to feel as much pressure to offer the best benefits, wages, hourly, etc.? They're not. So that may be part of it. So all of those point to, at least in the automotive, the home, the labor and wages sectors, point to maybe prices starting to cool. But if you are a glass half empty type of person, you would point to the fact that food and energy costs remain high, and they do. No big indicators right now that those have started to cool. So we'll see. And talking to a lot of people that really know inflation and know a whole lot more than me in this area, it does seem like the consensus is that inflation will continue to cool down throughout the year. But again, we never know. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with inflation. The second article we have is about the Apple car. I had heard about this. I'd heard rumors a little while ago. I weren't sure if they were true, but over time it has become clear. It's really an open secret at this point. Apple has put a lot of time and resource into trying to develop a car. It's interesting. I didn't know this. Steve Jobs actually wanted to build an Apple car even before they launched iPhone. So he had talked about that way back. And this has kind of been an underground type project, kind of behind the scenes thing. They've hired a lot of engineers. They even hired a lot of engineers away from Tesla to try to develop an electric car, an autonomous self-driving car. And we don't know a whole lot about the details just yet. Optimistically, the first we would probably see an Apple car is maybe as early as 2025, but that seems a little optimistic. So we'll have to see how it all shakes out. What's interesting though is, I mean, if any company would be poised to really be a rival to Tesla in the area of electric self-driving vehicles, you would think that Apple would have what it takes to do just that. But building a car it's a huge undertaking. It's a huge pivot for a company like Apple, who makes computers and phones, and to go down this road, you need a lot of work and a lot of people with totally different backgrounds and skill sets. But the profit levels on cars are not nearly what Apple is accustomed to. When you look at the profit margin that Apple has on their iPhones, on their Macs, on their software, I mean, it's huge. It's really impressive, the profit margin that Apple has on its products. Cars historically do not have nearly the same profit margin. And it's hard to imagine that Apple would be able to have nearly the same profit level on any car that they would manufacture compared to the other products. So some people believe what's going to happen is that instead of trying to build their own car, instead Apple will try to be in the car tech system space, as far as not building their own car, but really finding a niche within onboard entertainment. Because you think about this, in the next 10 years, autonomous driving is going to become more and more commonplace. And so the experience of getting in a car is going to be a lot more akin to getting on a train or flying in an airplane, where you're a passenger. You set your destination and you're off, and you really don't have to be at the controls. And so the ride experience, the passenger experience, is going to become a really important thing. And so a lot of companies are already starting to think along those lines. Tesla has really broken some barriers in that area with their onboard screen there on the dashboard. And so perhaps Apple kind of pivots into really putting more of their time and energy into that as opposed to building their own car. So we'll see how that all shakes out. Third article is about college graduates and some unrealistic expectations. I found this interesting. Actually, it was Andrew Smith shared this article with me, and I wanted to share it with you all. There's a survey done of about 1,000 college students, and they gauge, okay, what do you think you're going to make after you graduate from college? The average answer was $103,000, $103,880 a year is going to be their starting salary, which, as you probably can already guess, most college students don't make six figures right out of school. The average is about $55,000. So there's a lot of college students getting ready to be disappointed when they jump into the real world. Why is this? I mean, I have some ideas, some speculation. I can't tell you for sure, but I think probably for a lot of young people, they see how their parents or their grandparents live. They see how much money they make, their standard of living, and they just kind of think that's what the real world is. You get a college degree and you go out in the workforce, and boom, people just pay you lots of money right off the get-go. And they're not really realizing the time and energy that probably their parents and grandparents had to put in to get to that stage where they're at, and that it takes time, and nobody really starts there, or very few people do. I was also interested to see that depending on your college major, that also does make a big impact on your starting pay. So computer science majors were the highest paid, right around $75,000. Meanwhile, majors in journalism, humanities, liberal arts, psychology all had below average, so less than $55,000 as an average starting salary. So that's a big part of it too. What's your major? What's your skill set? Are you ready to jump into a very lucrative industry that has that's in a very competitive space, or are you doing something that is not a huge differentiator and something that you really have to prove yourself in before you before you can prove that you're worth a higher salary? So I did find that interesting. I think that's always been the case, that young people have a little bit more of an idealistic mindset about what the real world is going to be like. So, but that just kind of put it into hard and fast numbers there. And then I wanted to share this. I'm somebody who loves Google Street View. I'm weird like this, but I love to just go and look at places in the world and just see the street view. Like what does it look like in northern Alaska out in the wilderness? What does it look like over in some of these countries in Europe or in Asia or in Africa? Like I just like to go and see what the street view and get a feel for what real places look like in person. So Google Maps is going like next level with this. They're going beyond just the street view, but they're going to create an immersive view. A lot more tools that they have at their disposal now. So the next time you go to a big city, chances are you'll be able to use Google Maps' new features. You can do a virtual flyover of the city. The article has some concept art, looks really cool so you can kind of fly over, see some of the sites, see what the layout of the city looks like, being able to plan a visit, where your stops are going to be. But there's a lot of real-time feedback. You can see busyness at certain sites, traffic, calculate what the most fuel-efficient route would be. So I think there's going to be a lot of capabilities there. They're rolling it out in just a few cities: London, New York, San Francisco, Tokyo, but they're going to roll it out in a lot more cities throughout the year. So especially for more populated areas, I think you're going to start to see Google Maps go to a whole new level. And it makes sense. We have so many, not only AI, but also just the general connectivity of our devices. You have so much information and feedback in real time that if you build it correctly, you can really create an ecosystem where people can see things in real time. And it can be really, really helpful. Maybe the more cynical side of us says, yeah, but it also can be really invasive. So I'm sure that's part of it as well. But I found that to be a really cool article. Two other things I wanted to share. I found a really interesting visual. Got a lot of interaction with this post this month. There's a chart that shows the change in housing prices by county in the United States from 2000 to 2021. The darkest red counties have seen an over 300% increase in the average home price in the last 21 years, which is really astounding when you think about it. That means the price has quadrupled in just a little over 20 years. And on top of that, I just saw an article here today. The data from March has been released. Housing prices in March were up over 20% from where they were last year in 2021 at the same time. So housing prices have really jumped, and you're probably, if you haven't moved or are looking to move soon, I'm sure you've heard from some friends and family here recently just how crazy the market is and how high prices have climbed, especially in certain areas, especially in the more suburban areas and kind of in the Sun Belt as well. So that's an interesting visual. And then last thing, I put out an episode this month, got a lot of great feedback from it about how pastors can save big in retirement. If you're a pastor, or if you know a pastor, this is a really important thing that I wish more pastors were aware of. There's some different tax rules that apply to pastors, and when it comes to saving for retirement, there's a specific type of retirement plan that allows them to claim housing allowance in retirement. And for pastors that are not taking advantage of that, it's really important for them to do so. So I hope you'll check out that article, or if you're not a pastor, share it with the pastors that you know. And I think it could be a huge help to them, thousands of tax dollars in savings over time. So there it is. There's the wrap up for the Money Minute in May. We'll come back in June and share some more articles. And as always, appreciate everybody listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.